I'm Jessica Townsend, the author of the Nevermoor series, and welcome to week 8.5 of the Nevermoor Series Readalong. That's what we're going to call it. Hello. Where have I been? I've been on tour. So if you follow me on Instagram, you will know that I, just before I went on tour, or when the tour started, maybe, it's all blurring, I can't remember, said, hey, I'm not going to be able to finish this read-along before the tour begins because life got really super hectic. And that is exactly what happened. And listen, I gotta tell you, literally everyone in my life has said, we didn't even think you'd get to week 3, which is not a ringing endorsement of like me as a person and my level of organization and whatnot. But all of that to say, I got to week 8 and a bit and then it all kind of fell to pieces. But I did promise you, no matter what, we're going to finish this read along and it would just be whenever I can do it. So I am still mid-tour at the moment. I am off to Adelaide and Perth next. And then I have some more stuff in Brisbane and then Hobart and then the tour's done. But I have so far been to Brisbane Sunshine Coast, Melbourne Writers Festival, Auckland Writers Festival, Sydney Writers Festival, Words on the Waves Writers Festival in Central Coast. And it's been amazing, and it's been so good to see all of you in person. This job is there's a very strange duality to the job of being an author, in that you spend so much of your time just inside your own head, inside your own office, doing this on a computer. It's a very like solitary job. And then suddenly, for this brief period of, in this case, it's over kind of a couple of months, you know, whenever you bring a book out, it just gets a bit bonkers and you are suddenly like meeting all of the people who read your books, which is so strange. It's such a weird and wonderful thing to happen because it can kind of start to feel like you're just, I always sort of feel like I'm writing these books for myself, for an audience of one, which I think is a really good place to be while you are writing, for me anyway. But it's always such a nice reminder to go out and meet all of the readers and sign books for you and answer your many questions. And all of my events have been so fun. It has been so wonderful to see all of you and meet you. I mean, not all of you watching this, obviously, but, you know, see a percentage of you. Yeah, it's just been very affirming and lovely, and you're all just such a bunch of good eggs. And I say it all the time, but I just have really lucked out in that I have this readership of wonderful people who are just super like kind and lovely and inclusive and kind to each other as well, which is so lovely to see. So thank you all, and thank you for your amazing response to Silverborn. It is very strange to be talking to you when Silverborn is out in the world. On that note, I would say also, please, because Silverborn doesn't come out in the US until the 24th of this month, the 24th of June. And then also, I don't know who's watching this from other countries where their translations won't be published for a little while. So please, in the comments, please continue to keep the comments spoiler-free for Silverborn. Please. So, okay, here's what's going on. I filmed the first couple of chapter recaps of this video before the tour. Like, I managed to just squeeze them in literally hours before I had to get to the airport on the first, where I had to be picked up on the first day of tour. And so I've put the same jumper on for continuity. I've even painted my nails the same color for continuity. I'm very dedicated to my craft. But you'll notice that my hair for the first couple of chapters is about 2 or 3 inches longer because she's been cut off since then. Oh, that's the other thing I was going to say. Q&A with my friend Jeremy Lachlan, the author of the Jane Doe Chronicles. We will be doing that very soon. I will probably on the next week's video or at the end of this week, I'm not sure. I will let you know the date when that's going to be and how we're going to do it. I haven't totally figured it out yet, but I think we're going to aim for sometime around maybe the US pub date of Silverborn, either just before or just after, just depending on availability and what we can sort out. But we're both very excited about it. We had a chat about it the other day and we're really looking forward to it. And I'll talk more about that anyway when I announce the date. And also at the end of this video, I will be announcing the winner of the last giveaway. Thank you for being so patient. Yeah, that's all the housekeeping, I think. Let's get into it. Chapter something. I think it's chapter 20. It could be chapter 19. Nat, whichever one it is, it'll go and it'll tell you. I'm very tired. Chapter 20, Book Bugs. spoiler, the infestation is book bugs. Now, these are no ordinary bugs. They are the size of chihuahuas, and they are swarming out of these bookshelves like, quote, a monstrous chittering tidal wave of wings and eyes and legs. So many legs. And they are dangerous because Roshni says someone lost half a pinky to one and another person got a really bad bite on their ear. So they could cause some damage to these kids, and they are surrounded by them. They just keep coming closer and closer. And Miss Cherry says, okay, so what do we do? How do we stop them? Morrigan, acting immediately on instinct, breathes a line of fire towards them because she thinks, you know, quite sensibly, I guess, in a way, that should make these bugs at least retreat. And it works, they do retreat, but Roshni is furious because, of course, it's not a very helpful thing to do in a library full of books to breathe fire. What they normally do, the way that the book fighters, because they're obviously quite used to this is a regular occurrence, the book fighters and the librarians have trucks with mechanical swatters and tanks filled with a pesticide, like a foam pesticide that won't harm the books. And that's what they normally do. But no one's answering her call on the radio. The trucks are nowhere to be seen. And so they have to take matters into their own hands. And Archon takes the first swing. So one of the book bugs crawls up Anar's legs and up to her head. And he takes aim very carefully and hits this bug like an incredible baseball batter. They definitely call them batters. And it goes and explodes against a bookshelf in a shower of neon bug guts. And Miss Cherry says, okay, that's what we're doing. Everyone grab a book, to Roshni's horror. But they got to do what they got to do. No one's coming to help them. Morrigan, the only book that she has is volume 307 of the Wondrous Act Spectrum abridged history hoo-ha, and that's what she uses. She starts swinging. Now, Roshni was reluctant and quite horrified at first, but to her credit, once she gets over that initial horror at the vandalism of these books, she is on fire. With one perfectly aimed swing, Roshni knocked a black and blue striped bug straight out of the air, a rainbow of slime radiating outwards in its wake. Without pausing for breath, the librarian began swinging left and right, a ceaseless barrage that sent dozens of bugs to their deaths within moments. Morrigan could see why she'd been promoted. Roshni was a bug-murdering machine, fierce and unrelenting. I would give her the job of head librarian with that kind of murderous instinct. I'm sure that's somewhere in the job description. I don't know. So, the Riverglass coach is gone. It is covered in bugs. Just as things are looking absolutely desperate, finally the other librarians show up in their big truck and they just look like absolute heroes. A truck made of green rippled river glass was reversing down the road towards them at top speed, scattering the swarm, splattering some, and sending the rest flying for the shelves. The back doors flew open and a crew of a dozen people jumped out wearing full-body jumpsuits, heavy black boots, and great metal tanks on their backs. With spraying attachments they wielded like weapons, one in each hand. One of them carried a second tank out of the truck and tossed it lightly to Roshni. Incredibly, the brigade of bookfighters was led by an enormous ostrich one in a tweed vest. Twice as tall as the rest of them, with great big feathery wings. He had the longest legs Morrigan had ever seen, ending in clawed feet that looked like 3-pronged daggers. Have you ever seen an ostrich in real life? I have seen a lot of animals and a lot of like predators and apex predators in real life. I promise you the scariest ones are ostriches and cassowaries. They literally have weapons for feet. And they also have attitude. And they're huge as well, like especially ostriches. They're enormous. Okay, so the bookfighters and the librarians, they've got a handle on it. Miss Cherry ushers everyone from Unit 919 into the truck and they watch through the green river glass at this majestic bug swatting ballet as it unfolds. And Thadia, as a side note, has had a total 180. She's gone from absolutely hating the idea of the library to saying, I'm going to be a librarian, Thadia declared rapturously as a trail of putrid pus-coloured slime dripped down the side of her head. I feel like she's getting a skewed idea of what daily life would be as a librarian, but I don't know, then again maybe not. It is a very special library. Everyone is just covered in slime and bug guts and is shivering and miserable, and Miss Cherry explains where these book bugs came from. Book bugs, said Miss Cherry, still catching her breath, from the entomology section. There was this book, The Big Book of Bad Bugs. I feel like that's a really good name. I mean, not to big up myself, but I do feel like that's a very good name for like a non-fiction pictorial book of bugs. It must exist somewhere. I haven't Googled it, but I feel like there must be a book called The Big Book of Bad Bugs. If there's not, it feels like an Usborne book. Get onto it, Usborne. It was all about the world's biggest and gnarliest insects, and it got checked out by loads of people because it had such good pictures. It was opened and shut constantly, which is bad news around here. People got a bit careless, and about a year ago, some of the bugs got out. They started breeding before the bookfighters could round them all up. The bookfighters keep fumigating, but Roche says they get another outbreak every couple of months. They don't even try to get them back in the book anymore. That's how bad it is. They just kill them. So they watch the bookfighters fighting these, but something is a little off. The ostrich one, Colin Feathers. The ostrich one was the only one who didn't have a weapon, but he didn't need one. Those clawed feet of his were weapons, and he used them to great effect. His legs bent the opposite way to human legs, and as he flapped his immense black and white wings, he kicked up and outwards with a terrifying ferocity. This is what I'm talking about, a weapon. But he wasn't very precise in his attacks, not carefully targeting the bugs like Roshni and the others, but rather going a bit berserk. His eyes were wild and frightened. He was out of control. So Morrigan is looking through this green river glass, but if she wasn't, she's absolutely certain that his eyes would be glowing bright green because she's seen all of this before. Meanwhile, she has a little fire that she's conjured in her hands because everyone was so cold. And a couple of things happen in quick succession here. Firstly, Lamb turns around to Morrigan and looks at the fire and says, "Put that out right now." And then they hear a scream. And the ostrich one has lashed out at Roshni and injured her with those big claws. Morrigan feels this jolt of terror, and the fire in her hand responds to that, and it goes whoosh, and it grows, and it engulfs her hands, and this catches the attention of the ostrich one, who turns to look at them and then starts absolutely running towards the truck, which, again, I can't impress upon you how scary it would be to have an ostrich running at you. And Miss Cherry takes control of the situation, and she says, "Everyone get down," speeds them all the way towards the entrance at Mayhew Street, and she says, "Get out, go through those revolving doors, stand outside the library, and don't let anyone come in here. I'm going back to help Roshni." And of course they all object to this. "No, we want to stay, we want to help you." But she says, "No, everyone out." And Morrigan, run home to the Hotel Deucalion, get Captain North and tell him to bring the stealth. Chapter 21, Concerned Citizens of Nevermoor. So it's all bad news after their visit to the Gob. Nothing good has come from this. Roshni is in hospital. Miss Cherry has not left her side. Colin Feathers, the ostrich one, is also in the teaching hospital for obviously a very different reason. He is now comatose. Miss Cherry has taken full responsibility, and she is in trouble for having taken Unit 919, a bunch of kids, into this, what turns out to be a very dangerous liminal space, and for kind of underestimating how dangerous exactly it would be. And Morrigan feels bad because she was one of the people insisting that they go to the Goblin, and she doesn't want Miss Cherry to be in trouble. And on top of all that, she didn't even get to steal the book that she was trying to steal. So it's all a big fail. And not only that, but Jupiter is now saying, "You will not be going back to the Gob anytime soon. I wasn't going to take you there until you were at least 15, because it's a liminal space, and liminal spaces are super, super dangerous." He is exhausted. So it's the next day. He has been at the Nevermoor Bazaar, the opening night of the summer-long night market festival that happens every Friday night in Old Town. He and the Stealth have been out in force. They weren't able to get the, Nevermoor Council or Chamber of Commerce to cancel the Nevermoor Bazaar, which was their advice, because obviously it's a big boost to the economy every year. So instead the Stealth have been out patrolling the entire market, and their best weapon turns out to be Jupiter, because as a witness he can obviously see things that others can't. And what he is looking for in these crowds of people is Wunimals whose kind of like wondrous energy surrounding them has been depleted. It is almost entirely gone. So he's looking kind of for these little spots, these black spots, which are to him are an absence of wonder. And that's been kind of successful. They've been able to intervene before culminations of the Hollowpox in a few of these Wundermores. And because of that, they've been able to take these Wundermores basically in to be studied and questioned before the Hollowpox has its big dangerous culmination. So they've avoided the danger of that happening in public, and also they've been able to ask questions about where have you been, who have you seen, what have you been doing. So they are collecting all of this data. Unfortunately, it seems like the more data they collect, the more baffled they are, because nothing seems to line up. It's really hard to see any kind of pattern. Sophia has joined the task force and is kind of acting as like a Wundermore liaison, and is sort of giving advice to the Wundermore community. But again, it's really hard to give advice when they don't exactly know what kind of advice they should be giving. But the worst development of all is the formation of a political party called the Concerned Citizens of Nevermoor, who have taken it upon themselves to inform the public about the Hollowpox, even though clearly they don't know anything about it. They know even less than the Wondrous Society does. And they have created this poster that they are plastering all around town that is essentially just fear-mongering. If you flip back to the information poster that was put all around one sock saying this is what to look out for, if you're experiencing these symptoms, you may, need to be careful, blah, blah, blah. It was kind of unhelpful, but it wasn't actively harmful. What the Concerned Citizens of Nevermoor have created is actively harmful. It's very emotive, it's very aggressive. It says things like, the Wondrous Society doesn't want you to know that right now in Nevermoor, potentially thousands of rabid Wundermores are infected with this dangerous virus, putting you and your family at risk of savage attacks. The Wondrous Society has admitted that early symptoms of the Hollowpox are almost impossible to spot. So there's lots of capital letters and there's lots of just like dangerously emotive language that is designed to stoke fear and hatred. Morrigan observes that this language that they use, watch your neighbours, don't hesitate, act on your suspicions. It's like it's designed to turn everyone against Wundermores, against all Wundermores. So it's pretty clear that this Concerned Citizens of Nevermoor party has this agenda. Jupiter, of course, is furious because all it's going to do is make everyone more unsafe and make his job way more difficult. The rest of the summer goes by. Jack joins the Friday night Nevermoor Bazaar party. And Morrigan is forbidden to go because it's much too dangerous. But the thing is, they really need witnesses. Jupiter has brought in people from other pockets of the Free State, and Jack obviously has a very valuable skill and they're putting him to good use. The Concerned Citizens are making life more and more dangerous every week. They're setting up their protests and then they're attracting counter protests. So they are there doing their shouting into a megaphone, fear-mongering thing. And then of course Wundermores are showing up to counter protest, which then sort of puts everyone at even more risk because if anyone in that group is infected, this is the worst possible place that they could be. So it's all a big old mess. The last night of the Nevermoor Bazaar is coming up and Jupiter says, even you're not coming to this one, Jack, because it's much too dangerous. I feel like tensions are going to reach a high and something's going to go down and I don't want you anywhere near it. Oh, and by the way, I have also let Frank know that he can have a small soiree, a small dinner at the Hotel Deucalion on that night. So I kind of need you here to supervise. And Jack obviously sees through that in a heartbeat because obviously Jupiter is just trying to make him feel better about not being able to go on the last night. And the other thing that happens during the school holidays, one night, very unexpectedly, Morrigan hears a little tap, tap, tap on her station door through her wardrobe. And it's Sophia the Fox one, who has come to take her on a little midnight educational escapade to see a ghostly hour on the rooftop of Proudfoot House. And it is a lesson given by Gracious Goldberry, a Wondersmith called from years and years ago, called Gracious Goldberry, to two younger Wondersmiths. And Gracious Goldberry is a real piece of work. She's incredibly talented. Her use of Inferno is almost unrivaled. She does these spectacular things using the wondrous art of Inferno that Morrigan just can't even fathom. She's never seen anything like it before. But she also knows a little about Gracious Goldberry. She knows that she was this terrible, bigoted woman who called for the imprisonment of all Wundermores back hundreds of years ago when she lived. And she sort of brings this up to Sophia, like, wasn't this woman quite horrible? And Sophia says, I've been coming here for several years now, every year on this night to see this ghostly hour. And the first time I was just so filled with anger at this person. I came up here filled with hatred and spite, ready to scorn this awful person. And what did I find? Quite possibly the greatest wielder of Inferno who ever lived. And Morrigan says, that must have been annoying. Very annoying, Sophia agreed. I was incredibly angry at the time. I spent the next year being outraged that someone so awful could have been blessed with such a singular gift. But the following year I went back anyway, and I decided that this extraordinary talent could not be wasted on this wretch of a woman. I wouldn't allow it to be. I would render it useful somehow, someday. She fixed her gaze on Morrigan. And then you came along. So tell me, Morrigan Crow, did you get something useful out of that lesson? And Morrigan did. While she was watching, she noticed this particular thing that Gracious Goldberry does where she can breathe in air and breathe out fire at the same time. And Sophia says, oh, I've never looked that closely at what her mouth was doing before. I didn't realize that. That's such a good observation. That's called circular breathing. That is a skill that you can learn. Even some musicians and opera singers are capable of learning that skill. And so this is something real and tangible, a great benefit that she has gleaned from this ghostly hour with this horrible woman who did these terrible things to this persecuted group. I think there's a lesson in that for all of us, maybe? Chapter 22, The Sunset Gala. So it's been a rubbish summer. The Hollowpox has fully taken hold of Nevermoor, and what that has meant is that parties and events and all sorts of things have just been cancelled left, right and centre. Nobody is feeling the loss of this more than Frank, the Hotel Deucalion's resident party planner. This is what he lives for. His whole life is planning parties, and if he can't do that, what is he going to do? Probably drink a lot of blood, because he's also a vampire, and that's the other thing he lives for. But anyway, Jupiter doesn't want to put guests and staff and the people who live at the Hotel Deucalion in any danger by having these events that could go horribly wrong. And he also doesn't want to offend their Wanimal friends by not inviting them to events, because something could go horribly wrong. So everything just gets kind of shut down and scaled back, and Frank has had an absolute gutful. And so Jupiter does promise him towards the end of the summer that he can have a tiny little dinner. Keyword. The dinner does not stay a dinner. At some point in the week, Morrigan noticed Frank, had stopped referring to it as a supper. Now it was a little soiree, then a dance. By the time Jupiter left for the bazaar on Friday evening and the guests began to arrive, Frank was welcoming people to the Hotel Deucalion end of summer sunset gala. So there are quite a lot of people showing up, and Frank has no remorse for this. He's quite gleeful about it. And the theme, because obviously Frank always has a fantastic theme for his parties, the theme is Sunset Gala, to celebrate the end of summer and usher in the autumn chill. And so the Hotel Deucalion lobby has transformed from floor to ceiling into this beautiful sunset ombre scene. And the checkerboard floor has turned all black, and guests have been asked to wear all black, so that the effect will be that they are silhouettes against the sunset colours of the walls. And it's a success. Everyone's having a wonderful time. Early in the evening, it smelled of jasmine, citrus, and the ocean. Then later, as the sun set and the leaves began to curl and change colour, it smelled of rain and apples and rich dark soil. By midnight, the leaves were 1,000 shades of orange and red. The temperature in the lobby had subtly dropped. A fire was roaring in the hearth, and the scent of wood smoke filled the air. All the guests agreed that the Sunset Gala was a sensory triumph and the hottest ticket in town that night. Hundreds of hopeful gatecrashers were turned away at the door, but the later it got, the bigger the party seemed to grow. Jack is there, along with Morrigan, Hawthorne, and Cadence, and they are playing Morrigan and Jack's favourite party game, which is basically just Jack takes off his eye patch and then spills a bunch of tea about all of the guests at the party. So that guy's having a fight with his mum. She's cheating on her wife. Those two are secretly in love with each other, but neither one will admit it because, of course, as a witness, he can see all of these things. And it's fun. Now, Morrigan also knows that Jack, he has his eye patch off so that he can do the job that Jupiter would be doing if he was there, if he was not at the last night of the Nevermoor Bazaar. He is keeping an eye on everything. He is very conscious of where all of the Wanimal guests are in the party, just so that he can keep an eye and make sure no one is going to be overcome by the Hollowpox and have things go terribly awry. They see a celebrity dog one enter, and I just want to read the description. She's an elegant dog one with flowing silvery white fur, wearing a black velvet bow above each ear and a string of black pearls around her neck. I don't know if it's clear from that description, but in my head, she is an Afghan hound. If you've never seen that, Google it. They are the supermodels of dogs. They're just objectively beautiful dogs with long flowing silvery hair, and that's what she looks like in my head. But maybe you had another dog in mind in your head, and that's totally valid. So there's also a bunch of camera flashes because Morrigan and Jack noticed that a photographer from the Looking Glass, one of the tabloid newspapers in Nevermoor, has snuck in with his camera and he's sneakily taking photos, and he's taking a photo of the celebrity dog one. And they know that Dame Chanda will not be happy about this because she still hasn't forgiven the Looking Glass for their terrible article about what happened at the Maledictions opening night. Now, here is where it all begins to go horribly wrong. There is a couple who are very rude, and they start saying rude, nasty things. I was going to say under their breath, but no, they're saying it quite loudly for anyone to hear. They're making comments about the celebrity dog one and saying that, oh, if that's the kind of riffraff that the GKalians allowing in these days, this place really has gone to the dogs. Never mind the fact that they themselves are probably gate crashers. Now, that's not explicitly said on the page, but in my mind, I think they must be, because we've already established there are a lot of gate crashers, and as if anyone at the GKalian would be friends with these people, because they are, as we are about to see, quite awful. And they're just kind of relentlessly awful. Hawthorne overhears them referring to this celebrity as a dog, and he corrects them. He says she's not a dog, she's a dog one, because that is the appropriate way to name, address, describe a animal, is with the suffix one at the end. They turned as one to look down their noses at him. The man scoffed. Dog one, rubbish. If it's got 4 legs, a wet nose, and a tail, it's a dog. In my day, we called things by their real names, and none of this horse one, rabbit one, lizard one nonsense. I'm sick of having to be so respectful all the time. Dog one, he finished, shaking his head and downing his cocktail in one. Someone fetch me another drink, he added, snapping his fingers in the air. Anyone who's going to snap their fingers in the air for anything is quite awful. Morrigan says to her friends, what's wrong with being respectful? And Jack says, obviously it takes more than 2 brain cells. Yeah, and they've only got 1 between them, added Cadence with a snort of laughter. Now, this line comes from a very distinct memory I have of a line from the Australian soap opera Home and Away. Australian and British people will know what I'm talking about. The rest of you will not, and that's okay. I just remembered this line that has always stuck in my head. I can't remember who said this line, but it was someone from Summer Bay High who said to someone, if you had 2 brains, you'd still be a half-wit. And I don't know, I probably was 11 and I thought, that is peak humor. That is brilliant. I have to tuck that away in my brain. So that's kind of my version of if you had 2 brains, you'd still be a half-wit. Thank you, Home and Away. This woman and this man, this couple, they turn around and they're just like, what did you say? Blah, blah, blah. And they just start being relentlessly quite awful. And Fenestra steps in. And everyone gasps because, oh no, if Fenestra's going to step in, things are going to get messy. But listen, to her credit, Fenestra is actually, I will say I'm impressed. And I wrote it. I'm impressed by how well-behaved Fenestra is in this scene. She's very respectful. She's calm. She corrects them politely to a point, because as I said, they are pretty relentless about it. Finally, the woman says, oh, you're very rude. And Fenestra says, you're very rude and your dress is ugly. Jack is nervous because he knows Fen and he is very well aware of the whole Hollowpox thing that's going on, and he does not want this to devolve into a big horrible scene where Fen could come off worse for it. And so he says to her, Fen, maybe we should just ignore these people. And then Fen says something very important. She says, we don't ignore bigotry, Jack. That's how cowardly bigots turn into brave bigots. This is something that I think about a lot, and I think the same goes for many of you, because of all of the lines in all of my books, this is probably the one that gets quoted back to me the most often. It's the one that I am most often asked about in interviews. People message me about this quote. I get tagged in posts about the quote. It's very gratifying to know that it resonates with so many of you, and it kind of doesn't surprise me because, as I said earlier, my experience of my readership is that overwhelmingly you are kind, inclusive, big-hearted people. So it makes sense to me that something like that would make sense to you as well. You know, I think this sort of comes from an idea that a lot of us internalized in childhood. I don't know what the prevailing advice is these days to kids when dealing with bullies, because I'm not a teacher and I'm not a parent. But when I was a kid, the prevailing advice for dealing with bullies or meanness or whatever was to ignore it. Just ignore. I don't think that was always effective. I'm not saying never. I'm not saying that it was never effective. I do think that there is probably something to be said in certain situations for depriving bullies of oxygen. Not literally, I hasten to add. But, depriving those sort of situations of your attention and your focus, because, sometimes that's how they thrive. But I think that a lot of us as adults, we sort of internalized that idea and brought it into adulthood and applied it in situations where it shouldn't ever have really been applied. When we're talking about people sharing quite ugly, hateful ideas and being emboldened to share their bigotry, ignoring it is not the answer. Sometimes there is this idea that when we ignore those sorts of things, we are somehow taking the moral high ground. And I just don't think that's true. Bigotry thrives without opposition. It thrives in the dark. It thrives with our silence. And so, we really do have a moral obligation when we see awful ideas being spouted about people, individuals, groups of people, just trying to go about their lives. We do sort of have an obligation to speak up and shine a light on it and make it so that it is not normalized and it's not okay, and make it so that people are not emboldened to share these ideas. Hopefully that they are in fact embarrassed to share them. So this is where it all kicks off, because the woman demands to see management. She wants to see who's in charge. And this might be where Fen slightly makes a mistake, because she jumps up on the concierge desk and hisses at them. And she says, "I'm in charge here." In any normal time at the Hotel Deucalion, this is absolutely standard Fenestra behavior and would be completely fine. But we are in the middle of the Hollowpox. Things are fraught. Tensions are high. And these awful people accuse her of having the Hollowpox, despite the fact that she has just told them she is not a Wanimal, she's a Magnificat, and those are two completely different things, and Magnificats are not susceptible to the Hollowpox. Even so, they start throwing accusations around, and then it's picked up by other people, and things become a little tense and scary. And Morrigan doesn't know what to do, but she knows she has to do something, and she tries doing something she has never done before, which is that, so she starts gathering a lot of wonder, and she is trying to create a shadow, because basically what's happening is she sees the photographer from the looking glass putting new film in his camera. He is going to try to get a photograph of Fen behaving badly, or whatever this looks like, and she really doesn't want that, and so she decides she's going to diffuse the whole situation by creating a shadow and cloaking Fenestra so that no one can get a photograph of her. It is a skill that requires both the wondrous art of weaving and the wondrous art of veil. Morrigan took a deep breath to clear her head. She observed the room as if she were observing a painting, examining the shapes and colours of things, places the light touched, and the recesses where shadows formed, the very material she needed. All the while, she felt wonder sensing her intentions and taking them as commands, and she felt herself, that amorphous inner thing that was her, ballooning, growing, bigger than her body, reaching out into the room with its monstrous, wondrous arms and gathering what she needed, plucking bits of shadow here and there. Tiny bits, not enough to be missed, but enough to build a new shadow of her own making. She and Wonder were perfectly, exhilaratingly in sync. Soon the lobby was swarmed by starry darkness, a shadow that kept growing until everything was black. And then in the midst of this instant, complete darkness, something very strange happens. She sees this source of light come towards her from out of the darkness. And in fact, it's two little pinpricks of glowing green light. And then two more over here, and then two more over here. And she realizes that this is the glowing green eyes of infected Wanimals that she has seen before. There's a piercing screech of a bird, and there's squeals and there's shouts of surprise, and then Morrigan screams and she feels talons and beating wings around her head, and there's a snarling, snapping growl somewhere to her left, and then everything stops and she hears these three thumps, thump, 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 and the green lights emerge from presumably the bodies of these Wanimals that have fallen to the ground as the Hollowpox culminated in them. The green light leaves them and comes together to form one kind of nebulous shape in the darkness. And two important things here. One is that Morgan says to Jack, are you seeing this? Because obviously Jack is a witness. And he confirms, yes, he is seeing exactly what she's seeing. So this is the first time that Morgan has confirmation that it's not just her imagining this green eye thing. Jack can see it too. The second thing is that this light comes to examine her, and it's as if it is trying to get inside her, and it doesn't know how to quite make sense of her. And she realizes the Hollowpox is a living thing. It is a thing, not just a disease. And then the lobby is suddenly flooded with light again because Morgan has lost all of her energy and momentum that she had in creating this shadow, and the shadow disappears. The light floods the lobby, and this green light scatters. It breaks into dozens of little pieces of light, and they all disappear. The owl one, the giraffe one, and the dog one that they had seen earlier, they are on the floor. They had clearly had the Hollowpox culminated, and now they are staring into nothing, unconscious, in a coma or whatever, on the floor. And then the lobby explodes with noise and fear, and people are running, trying to get away from the bodies of these Wanimals, as if they themselves might be infected somehow. Except, of course, for Morgan, Hawthorne, Jack, Cadence, and Fenestra, who form a circle around the Wanimals to protect them from the stampede. And then everyone leaves Frank's disastrous Sunset Gala. Chapter 23, Rescue Rings. We're going to whiz through this one. Top notes only. Let's go. So, Morgan can't sleep. She goes to Jupiter's office to see if he's back from the Nevermoor Bazaar yet, and she finds Jack standing outside, eavesdropping. And the two of them eavesdrop together on Jupiter and Fenn's conversation. They're talking about telling the public about something. But then they get caught, and Fenn brings them in, and Jupiter says, well, they're going to hear about it anyway, we might as well tell them. Jupiter says, I spoke with Inspector Rivers last night. She has sources in the Wintersea Republic who believe that's where the Hollowpox originated. A couple of years ago, they had an epidemic that only affected Wanimals. They called it something different, of course, but their eyewitness accounts are identical. Agitation and loss of language, followed by a reversion to animalistic behaviours, leading to violence, and finally ending with the Wanimal in a comatose state, or worse. And so this happened a couple of years ago. It sort of went unnoticed because although the stealth and various other factions in Nevermoor do keep an eye on things that happen in the Wintersea Republic, it isn't necessarily easy to track things that are going on in the Wanimal community in the Wintersea Republic because they keep to themselves. The Wintersea Party doesn't officially acknowledge the existence of Wanimals, and that makes life difficult for them. And so they sort of live in their own communities, which tracks with Morrigan's experience of the Republic because, as she says, there are no Wanimals in the Wintersea Republic. Which Fenn takes exception to because she says, just because you don't see them doesn't mean they aren't there. And so they talk about the borders being closed and how could this have come from the Republic into the Free State when no one can get through? But of course people can get through because Morrigan got through with Jupiter, and Jupiter points out that there are ways into the Free State if you know what you're doing or if someone helps you. And there are Wanimals who have been in trouble who have needed to come into the Free State the way that Morrigan did. And Fenestra is part of a group who will smuggle them in if they are in need of help. She doesn't call it a smuggling group, she calls it a rescue ring. And as they're talking about the various ways into the Free State, one of them that they discuss is through the Harrow Strait and via the River Douro. But, you know, they would have to get through the Black Cliffs and all of these dangerous things. And Morrigan thinks of the vessel that they saw in the pawn shop and what Frances had said about it. She says, Fenn, what if they weren't in a boat above the water? Then they wouldn't be seen by the Coast Patrol. She tells them about this submarine vessel and she remembers what the shopkeeper said about it, which was that it was bona fide property of the Wintersea Party. She also tells them that Jack saw the green eyes, and she floats her theory to Jupiter that the Hollowpox is in fact not a disease, but a living thing, some kind of parasite that is acting like a disease. And Jupiter says, maybe. I mean, that would kind of make sense with the erratic pattern of infection because it doesn't seem to act the way a normal disease would act. And as her final piece of the theory that she is putting forward, she says, and Jupiter, what if it was Squall who made it and sent it into Nevermoor? That's what he does. He makes monsters. He can't come in by himself, but maybe this is his way of getting into the Free State and causing havoc. And Jove agrees that that is possible, but he swears everyone in the room to silence. and says, we can't really talk about this outside of this room. Fen says, Jove, don't you think that the Wanimal community deserves to know? And Jupiter says, it's the Wanimal community that I'm thinking of. Look at how you were treated last night when people thought that you had the Hollowpox. They were angry, they could have hurt you. He says, if that's how people act when they think it's a disease, imagine what will happen if we tell them it might be a monster or that Squall might be involved. It would be as good as telling them that Wanimals are monsters. We'd be declaring open season on the whole lot of them. And he swears all three of them to secrecy, and they promise not to tell. Chapter 24, From Bad to Worse. And things really have gone from bad to worse. So we open in the lobby of the Hotel Deucalion, where Frank is staging a very dramatic protest. He is swinging from a chandelier, and he refuses to come down. The reason for this is that Jupiter has made the very difficult decision to close the Hotel Deucalion until the Hollowpox situation is somehow resolved. This is following the advice of the authorities. And it is also following a bunch of terrible stories in the tabloid newspapers about the whole Sunset Gala debacle. As Jupiter had predicted, within hours of the gala's abrupt ending, the newspapers were already ablaze with news of the famous Hotel Deucalion, its famously mad ginger proprietor, a mysterious incident, and Wanimals behaving badly, all added up to excellent tabloid fodder. It didn't seem to matter that Jupiter wasn't even there. The concerned citizens of Nevermoor were louder than ever. Their spluttering, fist-slamming founder went head-to-head with prominent Wanimal rights activist Senator Giscard Silverback, himself a guerrilla one, in a fierce debate about the dangers of allowing Wanimals in public spaces in these troubled times. The mood in Nevermoor was tense. It felt like everyone was simply waiting for the next attack. And so, obviously, the only logical response to all of this is to swing from a chandelier, if you are Frank. He's refusing to come down. Jupiter is refusing to budge as well. He says, this is not up for negotiation. I've made a decision and this is what we're doing. Frank points out that their rival hotel, the Oriana, is still open. They're ignoring the advice and they're thriving. Jupiter snaps back that the Oriana has decided to ban Wanimals from the hotel, and that is why they are able to stay open, and he is not willing to do that. And so there's kind of this standoff. Jupiter also reminds Frank that he should kind of understand this situation and this experience of being turned away from various establishments and how wrong that is, because as a vampire, there are still places in Nevermoor that will refuse to serve him. But Frank says, yeah, exactly. And do you hear me complaining? Honestly, I don't blame them. I'm a liability. I bit a man at the supermarket last week. Dame Chanda gasped. Frank! Oh, it was just a nibble, he said with a wave of his hand. I sent flowers. Frank has quite a few of my favourite moments in this book. At least two, I think. And this is definitely one of them. So anyway, it's not up for discussion. Jupiter's made his decision, and that's it. Morrigan goes back to Onesock at the end of summer, but things really aren't any better there. The mood is tense. The mood is bad. 3 more Wanimals have succumbed to the Hollowpox. There was a boar one who trampled a woman in the street, an elderly poodle one who attacked her neighbour's grandson, and a crocodile one who dragged a man into the Courage Square fountain and nearly drowned him in a death roll. The task force has tripled in size. More and more Wanimals like Sophia are joining the task force to sort of help communicate with the family and friends of the affected Wanimals. Jupiter has passed on Morrigan's theory about the Hollowpox being a monster or a parasite to Dr. Bramble. Dr. Bramble is unconvinced, and she reportedly said, a monster that looks like a disease and acts like a disease in the body must, for all intents and purposes, be treated like a disease, and therefore can be cured like one. Morrigan is not impressed by this response. There is a very tense C&D meeting in which the lovely Dulcinea Dearborn says, I propose that all Wanimals be exiled from society grounds until we have a better understanding of what's happening. Baz Charlton and Hester Fitzwilliam agree with her, and you know it's going to be a great idea if your biggest cheerleaders are Baz Charlton and Hester Fitzwilliam. And it results in another very tense standoff between those three and Elder Saga. But then they are interrupted when Holiday Wu rushes into this meeting and hands a note to Elder Quinn and then rushes back out again. Elder Quinn stayed still and quiet for some time after she read the piece of paper, her expression unchanged. Finally, she spoke in a grave voice. the Hollowpox has taken a life. Chapter 25, we're all on the same side, really. So we have our first death from the Hollowpox, and it was a Baboon One fisherman who attacked 4 young men disembarking from a boat, and then he, in the frenzy of the Hollowpox culmination, threw himself from the boat and seemed to be comatose before he hit the water, and he never emerged, even though people tried to save him. So that is our first death from the Hollowpox, but it's not our last. And in fact, the second one occurs before the end of the day, because one of those young men who was in a critical condition due to his injuries has succumbed to those injuries, and he has now died also. So tensions are very, very high, and they just keep ramping up throughout this chapter. So first of all, Gideon Steed, the Prime Minister, responds to this by putting a curfew in place, a sunset curfew. He says, Wanimals cannot be out after sunset. Senator Giscard Silverback, the Gorilla One senator, storms onto the airwaves saying, most of us in the Wanimal community have already taken it upon ourselves to isolate, and still we are treated like criminals. We don't wish to catch this virus. We don't wish to hurt our fellow Nevermorians. Need I remind the Prime Minister, there have been 2 deaths, 1 human, 1 Wanimal. Yet Steed does nothing to protect his Wanimal citizens. Instead, he continues to defer all moral responsibility for the care of these Hollowpox victims, yes, they too are victims, to the Wondrous Society. One sock can only carry this burden so far, the government must step in. And they're listening to this, Unit 919, on home train, and Anar agrees. She says he's right. We can't take the strain of this anymore. The locked ward in the teaching hospital has become an entire locked wing. There are over 100 Wanimal victims of the Hollowpox in the teaching hospital. We are overrun. She's clearly exhausted, and she's a 13-year-old who's just stepped in to kind of like help out at the hospital. But she is being completely overworked because of this situation. And she agrees the government should step in, and One Sock shouldn't have to bear the burden of this any longer. Gideon Steed responds on the radio to Senator Silverback by saying, if Nevermoor's Wanimals don't wish to be caught in the firing line of infection, they ought to stay home and stay safe. But of course, Morrigan knows that's not how the Hollowpox works, because even if Dr. Bramble won't accept it, she is certain that it is not acting like a normal disease. The Hollowpox wasn't going to stop because of a curfew. Whatever it was, demon, parasite, monster, it wasn't going to give up just because one animal stayed home at night. It wasn't floating around like germs, infecting only those who came into contact with it. It was hunting, and Wanimals were its prey. It would find them no matter where they were. Things are bad, things are tense, things are angry. The next day, there have been 38 Wanimal arrests as Connell shouts on his arrival at sub 9 in the morning. And again, things are a little tense between him and Sophia, because he's there suggesting that if Steed doesn't come to his senses, then they should take it to the Wanimal Rights Commission or storm Parliament if they have to. So he's come in fully guns a-blazing. Sophia is a much quieter, more measured person, and she asks him to calm down. But he says, calm down, Sophia, do you not see your rights being eroded? I won't just stand by. Sophia comes back with, I can assure you, I am aware of the precise condition of my rights every single day. You may safely assume most Wanimals are. And I think that Connell probably deserved that clapback, because although she is quieter and more contained in her worry and anger over this, she is, after all, part of the community that is most affected by this. They ask Morrigan what she thinks about this curfew business, and she says that she agrees with Connell. It's dreadful of Steed to arrest people for something that shouldn't be a crime. It's only going to make people more frightened. And how is the Hollowpox mission going to keep trying to find the infected before they attack? A third of the task force is made up of Wanimals, and now you can't go out past sunset. Couldn't the elders at least get special permission for you and the rest of the task force to ignore the curfew? But Sophia says it doesn't work like that. The elders can't petition the government for special favours, and Connell points out it's not about just getting special permission for a small group of privileged people. It is about fairness for all Wanimals. And Morrigan says, well, maybe you're right, Connell, maybe we should storm Parliament. And she is getting kind of worked up about it in the way that, I mean, here is a perfect example of reminding us that, like, Morrigan is a kid. She's a little kid. And she says, maybe we should storm Parliament, all of us, the whole Wonder Society. If we all came together to challenge Gideon Steed, just imagine that, all these ones with all these knacks, would you want to say no? Maybe it would frighten them enough to... And she trails off again because she sees how disappointed Sophia looks. And Sophia says to her, "We don't use our knacks to tyrannize people, Morrigan. It's not what the Wonder Society is about." And so Morrigan has, in her defense of Sophia and the other Wonimals, she's gotten very worked up and come up with this kind of mad solution of, hey, we're all a bunch of tough guys with a bunch of cool knacks. Why don't we kind of use that and throw our weight around a bit to achieve what would be more fair? But of course, here is a stark reminder that Morrigan is not just a kid, she's also a wondersmith. And she is very sharply reminded that, tyrannizing people is what the wondersmith supposedly did. It's what Ezra Squall did. And so even though she meant it, it came from a really good place, she instantly feels ashamed because, of course, that's not what the Wonder Society is about. They can't just go around tyrannizing people and using their knacks to get their way. And Sophia does say to her, "It's all right. You were trying to show you're on my side. I know that. I just want you to remember that there are no sides to this. Wonimals, humans, we all just want this to be over. Even Prime Minister Steed and the Stink. We're all on the same side, really." Morrigan isn't sure that she agrees with that anymore. Morrigan heads up to the rooftop of Proudfoot House for a ghostly hour lesson with Gracious Goldberry, that very impressive wielder of Inferno. And as you might expect, she's doing some very fancy things with fire. And there is only one other wondersmith, Maurice Bledworth. And this is way past beginner level. There are some skills in here that Morrigan has never seen before, is not familiar with. And she thinks that means either Rook has made a mistake in her schedule, or she thinks she's ready for this. She thinks she's ready to step up. And Morrigan finds that quite satisfying because she also thinks that she has been improving, particularly with Inferno. But on the other hand, Gracious Goldberry was the absolute last wondersmith she wanted to see this morning. She felt furious and frightened and sick. She was worried for Sophia and angry about Steed's curfew and the 38 arrests, and furious at the memory of Dearborn and Hester's outburst at the last meeting. And now she had to spend a morning with an infamous opponent of Wonimal rights. Morrigan was tempted to leave and skip the lesson altogether, but good grief, was Goldberry brilliant. And she remembers what Sophia said the last time they were on this rooftop watching Gracious Goldberry, the way that she talked about wanting to render this woman useful and glean something from her incredible talent. And Morrigan just doubles down and really focuses in on this lesson, and she learns some incredible things that she has never done before. And for the first time in a long time, she begins to feel hopeful because she feels as though she is really improving as a wondersmith. And although nothing has tangibly changed in terms of what's going on with the Hollowpox, something has changed in her. She really is getting better at this, even though she is starting to acknowledge and to notice the challenges and difficulties in learning only through the ghostly hours. The problem with ghostly hours was that she couldn't simply put up her hand and ask a question. She had to rely on whoever had been present in the original lesson to ask. So unless they were much younger or much less experienced than she was, most of her questions went unanswered. Even if she remembered to ask Sophia or Connell or Rook afterwards, they could rarely help her with practical matters. They just weren't wondersmiths. And so the issue that we see emerging here, even though Morrigan doesn't necessarily explicitly say it on the page, is that Rook is recognizing that she is becoming better at certain wondrous arts, and so she is putting her in more advanced lessons. But in those advanced lessons, those advanced wondersmiths aren't asking the kinds of questions that a wondersmith as young as Morrigan would need to ask. And so it kind of limits her education in a way, as much as it is advancing it at the same time. And she learns this really particular thing because Bledworth does ask one question. He says, "How do you do that? I can't seem to see where it's coming from." "Where what is coming from?" asked Goldberry, looking annoyed at the interruption. "The flame," said Bledworth. "Even when it's completely died, you seem to bring it back so quickly, so easily." The older wondersmith and Morrigan watched closely as Goldberry made her entire forearm a torch and then let it sizzle all the way down to the tips of her fingers until it was entirely extinguished. Or not entirely. Goldberry held out one finger, and leaning in close, Morrigan could see the tiniest, most minute, almost invisible spark of fire hovering at the very edge of her skin. And Goldberry says, "See, it's not dead. You only need a spark. Small sparks make big fires. And with this tiny little spark, she runs her fingers along the length of the rooftop, and she brushes her fingers upwards in this wide arc of fire towards the sky, proving her point. You only need a small spark to make a big fire. Morrigan is caught up in this feeling of optimism about her improving skills and her growing mastery of Inferno. But in that moment, nothing good can last at the moment in Nevermoor, because a sound from behind her brought on a rush of adrenaline. Her heart drummed a warning before her brain even registered what it was. Morrigan turned around slowly, while Ezra Squall hummed a song that felt like spiders crawling beneath her skin. Ew. That's the other half of week 8, done and dusted. When will week 9 come? I don't know. I was hoping to get all of that filmed before I went off on the next leg of the tour, but I go off on the next leg of the tour in 20 minutes is when I'm being picked up. So we'll see. It'll depend on if I can get some filming done this week while I'm away. I think hopefully, maybe, I don't know. I'm going to try. If not, it might be way later down the track because I also need to fit in with the schedule of the saint that is editing these videos, Nat Amor, who, P.S., is about to be in the UK at Barnes Kidlit Fest. Go and get your tickets now. I'll put a link in the thing down there. But yeah, it'll depend. It'll just be when it can happen. We're going ad hoc from here on in. We're wading into uncharted territory. But it will happen. Week 9 video will come, and the live Q&A event with Jeremy Laughlin will also come. Whether or not it happens before the US pub date or after the US pub date, it's going to happen at some point. And the other thing is that I was chatting to Jeremy and I was originally going to put to you the question of, do you want that Q&A event to have spoiler questions for, like, are we going to encompass Silverborn in there, or are we just going to keep it at the first 3? But Jeremy and I talked about it, and we think it's fairer just to keep this Q&A event for, like, just focused on Nevermoor, Wondersmith and Hollowpox and questions about those first 3, and we're going to keep that one spoiler free. However, we did chat about the possibility of doing a second event, like a few months down, like kind of closer to the end of the year, or at least a couple of months after the pub date for Silverborn in the US, so that people have a chance to read it. And then maybe we do like a specifically Silverborn spoiler friendly event where you can just ask me anything about Silverborn. Let me know your thoughts if that is something that you would be interested in. But yeah, no spoilers for Silverborn in the comments, just as another reminder. I gotta go because I gotta upload this and then go and get to the airport. Oh my goodness. And the winner of the giveaway is here. This is the name of the person. Haven't chosen them yet. Haven't randomly done the doodle-doo, doodle-doo. But this is you. You won the... Do your editing magic there, Nat. This is you. You have won the signed and personalised Silverborn Australian paperback. I will send this anywhere in the world, so it doesn't matter where you are. And also the 2 pins, which I can't find right now, but I know they're here somewhere, and those are yours as well. And I, again, can't stop and look for them because I gotta get a flight very soon. Talk to you all soon, and I don't know how to end this video because I'm already thinking about how I have to go and finish packing in the next 15 minutes. Okay, bye.